as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people are going to be, from your background, are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Saturday. Finally, at last, the weekend is here, and we're actually with you this weekend. We had to take that hiatus, but we're back and better than ever now, firing on all cylinders. I want to thank you all for joining us on Rumble. Rumble.com/MRadPod is where you can find us. And when you do, make sure that you smash the thumbs up 2, 4, or 24 times, whatever is necessary, and do follow the channel. If you listen to the audio format on iTunes or Spotify and iHeart, any of those platforms, make sure you subscribe so you can get our new episodes, which drop every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. As I aforementioned, it is Saturday, which means the 59-minute rule is out the window. We can go a couple minutes extra if need be, and we probably are going to need it today, folks, because we are jammed packed talking about all things border and illegal aliens today, because we are bordering on madness. That is the name of today's episode. But before we get to that, let's bring on my counterpart, Garrett O'Boyle. Find him on social media at GOBActual. We saw each other recently, but I always like to see you, Garrett. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. It took, that trip, 5 days, roughly 4.5. I was tired by the time I got home, but always good to see you in person. And, we went out to Vegas. I know you mentioned it on Thursday, but it's good to see Cash all the time. It's rare, but always welcome. And those trips, sometimes I'm like, man, do I really want to do another trip? But I think they're worth it, because who knows how much longer this piece of our life is going to continue. But always interesting, always good to see people who are supportive and kind of get the message out. And then, I went down to South Dakota after that and did a speech there too. And same type of deal though, man. It's interesting. The life of a suspendable is an interesting one.
It was probably worth the trip just to see Cash wearing a Hulk Hogan inspired t-shirt, because he's just a regular guy. It's one of the few one of the few takeaways that we have from this entire experience. I have this really interesting Rolodex in my phone. My contacts list has some very interesting names on it. He's one of them. But then when you get a chance to meet them and you realize, oh, you're just really, really a regular guy. And we can't say high enough praise for Cash. He's been really good to you and to me, to all the suspendables. So always an honor to get a chance to hang out with him. Now to the topic at hand. Like I said, got a lot to cover. I prepared this one, and the stories are legion. I use the term very specifically. There are more of them out there that you can possibly catch on to because of the border invasion. And we're going to do our best today, because language matters. Illegal aliens is going to be the term du jour. So the first one, it was because it was mentioned in the vice presidential debate, which happened earlier in the week. It was the CBP One app that Senator J.D. Vance was mentioning, the Customs and Border Patrol One app, where we're basically setting up a cell phone app for illegals to come to the United States, and not even from Mexico. They're flying in, but now we're starting to bus them in. So I saw this one over at Breitbart to give interesting background for this story. Mexico's National Institute of Migration announced the arrival of the first bus of migrants, but of aliens, under its new Secure Emerging Mobility Corridor program. The program offers migrants free transportation, including meals and security, from the Mexico-Guatemala border to ports of entry in the U.S., where they will be admitted under the Biden-Harris CBP-1 app. Up to 1,450 illegal aliens are released into the U.S. daily under the CBP-1 app asylum applications. The aliens are not required to pass a credible fear interview, because if you are seeking asylum, you have to actually sit down and say, I'm seeking asylum. I need sanctuary from whatever the perceived threat is, but we're just going to wave it on through. It's fine. We're just going to label you as an asylum seeker. That's no longer a hurdle in the way. And the CBP-1 smartphone app is separate from the recently reinstituted other program, the Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelan program, which we will get to. But right now, let's focus on the asylum seeking, because I can think of other individuals who are seeking sanctuary that might come across your radar, Garrett. Your thoughts on how we're doing this?
It's insane. I saw the clip from the VP debate. So I spoke that night, so I had to catch up later, and I watched a number of clips, and I really liked when, I guess we'll get there in a little bit, but when they cut JD Vance's mic when he was fact checking them on the spot for being wrong about the Haitian stuff in Springfield, Ohio, and they just cut his mic. Like, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to hear it. The guy's bringing the truth, but we have our talking points we have to stick to. But the CBP One app stuff is wild. So I saw a video, because of the mention of it in the debate, and some normal white dude was like, I just wanted to see what this was all about, so he downloaded it and was kind of going through it. Here's what I want to know, Steve, is CBP, Customs and Border Protection, that has that just become another Orwellian term for this nation of ours? Because where are all the people in that agency saying, yeah, we are blatantly just breaking our own laws about customs and border protection and asylum seeking and how it's done? And, you know, the the regime is going to say you're a racist if you just don't let everybody in. This is another one of those things for me where it's been like, the replacement theory stuff. I don't know, whatever. But then you get into these stories and it's like, busloads, hundreds of thousands of illegal, millions, actually.
Just one application is 1,450 people a day.
That's insane.
You were just in South Dakota. I mean, there are many of towns in South Dakota that have fewer than 1,400 total people.
Right.
And it's not like they're bringing them in and then just keeping them in this giant internment camp. They're just being filtered and dispersed throughout the country.
Right.
And it's the tech behind it. I want to know who was the brain trust, who were the tech geeks in Silicon Valley who they tasked with, and I'm sure received a very lucrative government contract. Hey, we need an app for a bunch of illegal aliens to be able to pull up on their phone so that they can register to get on a bus that we're going to give them. And we're going to give them all the food that they want, all the security they want, to get them through that extra really difficult part of the journey where they could actually die. And we'll bring them directly to the port of entry. We don't want to they can't go to the areas in between because that's illegal. We want to definitely be by the book here. We'll bring them through a port of entry because they're seeking sanctuary, from whatever threats that they deem to have, by the 1,400 a day from all over the world. And then they're just climate refugees, right? They're just economic refugees. And when we sit down and ask them those questions and ask them, what are you running from? They are going to be like, I just kind of want a job. Oh, yeah. Well, we just won't ask them that question.
Yeah, it's better here, so I need asylum.
In the CBP, we talked to J.J. Carroll for his movie a couple months ago, and I've had conversations with him about it, and this is just one of the elements of it. But the morale for the Customs and Border Patrol is through the floor. It's so far through the floor, it's in China. at this point. And because you're not joining Border Patrol to just make sandwiches and facilitate people invading the country. But I'm sort of with you on this. Why aren't you throwing a flag? You don't owe them anything. They called you racist because there were a bunch of guys on horses that had the reins that they said, oh, they're whipping the
Yeah.
illegals. That's still out there. Those guys are still under investigation.
That's insane, dude. And I mean, that was debunked almost immediately, even though high-ranking people like Comrade Kamala herself out there saying that they're racist and whipping people. And it's like, that's one of those things I bet a lot of people have memory hold, like
Yeah.
there's so many stories like this. I was just talking to some people from church about it the other night. And it's like, oh yeah, there's so much that happens that we forget about, like we were talking locally here about the Rittenhouse stuff and how that originated. And it was with the shooting of a black man, Robert Blake. And it was like, oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
And
the guy who pulled the knife on the officer.
yeah. And it's like, and even that one, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, I think Joe Biden came out within 45 minutes of the shooting and was like, it's systemic racism. And it's like, actually, that's completely justified shoot. And then the city burned. And it's the same thing with the Border Patrol agents, quote unquote, whipping illegal immigrants. No, that's not what was happening. You're lying. And that's the piece too. It's like, you got to know they have to know they're lying. They're doing it intentionally, just like basically opening the border to floods of illegal immigrants to include hundreds of thousands of criminals, like known. And it's like, yeah, whatever. And it's that type of stuff when it starts coming out where I'm like, okay, I think there's some meat on the bone here for these theories of like replacing what America was. That's clearly what's happening. I don't know how you can argue with that.
And the goal here is how overwhelming it is. And my goal today actually was to sort of have the show be the feeling of why it's so overwhelming. The overwhelming number of people. Here's the overwhelming number of stories that you're not going to be able to keep up with. You might have to go back and watch this all over again for the number of stuff that we're planning to cover here. Okay. So I mentioned the CBP1 app, and there's another element that's referenced in that Breitbart story. And we'll attribute this one to Catholic Vote. All right. So Catholic Vote came up with this story. New government stats: over 1 million migrants, again, over a million illegal aliens enter the U.S. under just 2 of the Biden-Harris parole programs. Now, here's your problem with parole. People don't understand what parole means. Parole, they think, oh, well, you get paroled out of prison, you get good behavior, and as long as you follow some certain rules and get a job and don't fail a drug test, then you are out. But if you violate, you go right back to prison. Parole, when it comes to immigration, is completely different. They parole people into the country for a very specific purpose, like they are the witness in a criminal trial. Like there's a Pablo Escobar type figure standing trial, and the United States Attorney, the Department of Justice, needs to get a witness from Mexico to come testify. So they will parole them into the country to testify, and then they will be out. And it's very strict. It'll be like 5 days. And Border Patrol must either escort them over the border or watch the plane fly away. And then once that's gone, all right, he's out. He's out of the system. If he tries to come back, he's illegal if he doesn't use the proper channels. But according to Catholic Vote, and according to Customs and Borders Protection statistics, about 1.3 million migrants entered the country under a pair of the Biden-Harris administration's parole programs. These entries are classified as lawful and are therefore not included in counting the federal government's total number of illegal border crossings.
That's crazy. I mean, think of that right there. That's malicious. That's a malicious use of our system by our own government. That's crazy.
So the aforementioned CBP1 app, right? It's about 800,000. Okay. And then the other one is via this CHNV, which was Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, Venezuela. And that's the mass parole program. That's 530,000 people. And again, these are not considered illegals. So that's 1.3 million people who are considered to be here lawful, including the Venezuelans that are now living next door to me, just so you know. And I just thought for a second, let's just put it into context. The number of people who are not illegal per Kamala Harris and Joe Biden They're here lawfully, but we're just paroling them in to hang out for 6 or 12 years, whatever it takes.
Mhm.
How many cities in America have 1.3 million people?
I mean, not that many, like, yeah, we have some big cities that have, a lot of people in them, but the majority of our cities don't. I mean,
8.
even 8.
8.
That's not many, you know?
So, what and just to be fair, there's a ninth city that has roughly 1.3 million. It's Dallas. The city of Dallas is just Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuelan, and other people who jumped on the app.
Mhm.
That's how many people. Jacksonville is
Dallas is big,
a
man.
million.
Like, that's because I know people will say, "Well, it's really not that many people. We've got, a couple hundred, few hundred million people in the country. You disperse them throughout. It's no big deal. We can handle it." No, we can't because it's just more and more and more and more every day. And
What if I
often,
told you Washington, D.C. plus Atlanta is less?
dang, that's crazy. That's crazy. Just keep busting them in, though, Steve.
Just drip, drip, drip all the way through. Um, Now, this is also not being just facilitated by our own government. I think we need to know that they are our government, because it hates us so much, is partnering with foreign governments, either willfully looking the other way, knowing that it's happening because it's being reported by media sources, or I presume that there are backdoor deals going on saying, like, hey, you can go ahead and do that. And so I saw a couple of stories here. One came from the American Thinker, and then the other one comes from the Voice of America. So not really a right leaning source, but the American Thinker. All right, Mexican officials are selling humanitarian visas because they had an election. Their president serves a 6-year single term. So AMLO is what they call him. He's got an acronym for his name, which is pretty cool. So he's leaving office, and because they're leaving office, they're not going to be held accountable by their Justice Department. It's so corrupt that even after they leave office, they won't charge them for what they're doing. They just start selling assets and access that they have because it's ollie ollie oxen free. So in Mexico, they call it La Piñata. That's the transition period between two presidents, where the outgoing president and his minions steal everything that isn't nailed down before exiting office. Mexico's National Migration Institute revealed officials are demanding bribes and illegally selling travel documents to come under humanitarian grounds to the United States. They're just stamping them with approval. So now the outgoing president won't be held accountable. The incoming president won't be held accountable. So any American authorities can be like, well, we can't even blame anybody. They just came through with the paperwork. And then the Voices of America took it out of the Mexico context and they took it down to Nicaragua. Daniel Ortega is in charge of, and he does not like himself, the United States. So Nicaragua's president, Daniel Ortega, he's a longtime nemesis of the U.S., has deliberately made it easier for migrants, illegal aliens, and not just Nicaraguans, okay, all stripes, to bypass the Darien Gap by flying them over into his country and then heading north. So fly into Nicaragua. I hate myself, the United States. We'll facilitate you landing, and then we'll let you go straightly directly into the United States. So from the capital, Managua, migrants travel to Honduras and Guatemala, then to Mexico to the southern border with the United States, paying thousands of dollars to smugglers. And Daniel Ortega is happy to facilitate it because he hates the United States and
Mhm.
he's making himself a cool little paycheck by these
Yeah.
people.
I mean, dude, it's the perfect scam. It's the perfect scam for enemies of our country. It's the perfect scam for Marxists. They all profit and then they just flood the nation and just shut up, peasant, take it. Like, dude, the border stuff, it's got to be. I mean, I was talking to my wife about this recently. If I had to pick one issue, which I don't, I tried to take the whole, the whole palette and decide on who am I going to vote for, etc. If I had to pick one, it would be abortion. I mean, it's murder. So, but aside from that, the border has got to be the biggest issue, the biggest crisis aside from the murder of the preborn, because look what it's doing, man. Like, it is changing the fabric of our nation. It is no doubt, it's it's adding to an increase in crime. It's adding to an increase in fear of the populace. It's adding it to an increase in the change of our nation, and the government is perpetuating it. Like where I live, it's you'll be happy to hear this, Steve. I started running again recently. I'm not running 12 to 14
Just in
miles.
time for winter.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like, okay, let's start. But uh in my neighborhood, if people have political signs up, it's mostly Trump ones. But I'm starting to see more and more Harris Walz signs, and I'm like, you live in a relatively affluent suburb of Milwaukee. Do you even understand the policies that you're advocating for by saying like you want to vote for Kamala Harris? Like, has your life really been better the last 3.5 years that she's been vice president? Like, aren't you feeling the impact at the grocery store? Or even better, how about I get a busload of Nicaraguans and Nicaragua? I should have picked a different. It was Haitians. I'll get a busload of Haitians, and I'll bring them to your door and say, "Hey, you guys can stay here." But it's the typical liberal, um, the ones that don't live in the heart of Portland or the Chop Zone or Milwaukee or wherever. They live on the outskirts, and they believe the lie of what liberalism has become. And it's like, well, as long as I don't see it, as long as I don't have to deal with it, other than at the gas pump and at the grocery store. But then it doesn't register in their brain that that's because of the policies that they're advocating for with their vote. And it's like, and then you're so proud of it that you're going to stick the sign in your yard. Like, you have a mental disorder. Michael Savage right there. That's what he used to always say.
I think that the way we've opened the show with some of just the relative statistics and the numbers, people can't contextualize what 1.3 million people have. And if you're all in and you have the Harris Wall sign in your yard, you're thinking, well, you're just a racist who doesn't want these people in there because you don't have Venezuelans living next door like Real Steve Friend does. And they haven't mowed the grass in a month because they don't have the same standards that we do. Now, it has to be a quality of life issue to drive that person, not even to the polls to vote against what they think is their issue, just to stay home. And I think that there's an element of that from the electoral prospects. So when you're examining this, we're going to go like out to in. So the out being the sheer volume of people that have come across, just with a couple of little programs, not everything, not just the regular family of four that shows up and plops itself down on the side of the road and Border Patrol finds them in a day or two and then has to take them. And they're not even asking them any questions. And they say, because they've met with some NGO just south of the border who said, when you get picked up, just say you want to go to Nashville and they have to take you. And they'll give you a notice to appear in 8 years. And if you don't show up, then we're going to declare you illegal and we'll come after you in 2032. What could possibly happen between now and then? I mean, we might have an election or two. We might have amnesty or a 1.3 million amnesty, or probably something north of that. We might have a war. We might have, I don't know, a social security crisis. We have to have more people because Americans are having babies. Wouldn't you know it? They're already here. Problem solved. So these are the sorts of thinking that people aren't doing because they're not doing the 30,000-foot view. Those numbers are just dwarfing their mindset. They have to have the actual quality of life. So I want to keep it in the context of the elections, and then we're going to get to the risks that are actually there, things that you can contextualize. So this one comes from Daily Wire, and it's about the big baddie, right? This is George Soros. How Soros-backed organizations leverage waves of new immigrants to sway elections. Again, waves of new immigrants. So I guess that could include people who are not quote unquote illegal. Let's find out. The National Partnership for New Americans describes itself as a national, multi-ethnic, multiracial partnership network of 60 or more countries, leading immigrant and refugee rights organizations. So 60 countries are getting together like, hey, let's send a bunch of people to America. That seems kind of like a war threat, right? That's an act of war.
Yeah.
The group received over $500,000 from Open Society Foundation, that's run by George Soros, from 2016 to 2021. The group had a total revenue of over $4 million last year. They support naturalizing over 250,000 citizens. So congressional districts with a higher than, so just sheer numbers here, right? So they want to legalize 250,000 people. So if the districts have a higher than average number of foreign-born people, they vote for Democrats 90% of the time. So that would probably be the
Jeez.
motivation behind wanting that to happen.
Yep.
The foreign-born population in the U.S. is now over 50 million,
Whew.
and the illegal immigration accounts for 58% of that. So 6 of 10 of so roughly 30 million illegals, if I do my math correctly. And if you talk to JJ Carroll, that's a very low estimate. Now, when that's going to have electoral consequences. But again, if you have the Harris Wall sign in your yard, you probably think, well, that's a good thing. Now let's contextualize it. Let's take it to things that are actually going to impact you anecdotally. And if you can't think of things at a macro level, you need to have an anecdote. Politicians understand that. That's why they bring people to the State of the Union and tell their story. I mean, we saw that in the debate. I can't help but think about little old Jane. She's got no eyes and no ears and no lips. And couldn't the world be better if her mom had just aborted her? So Tim Walz, right? That's the type of thing that they do. Now, this comes from Missouri. The suspect is facing DWI charge in crash that killed a St. Louis cop. Charges have been filed against a man accused of driving drunk, causing a crash that killed a St. Louis police officer. Officer Lee was behind his police vehicle and retrieving traffic cones from his trunk when another driver lost control, spun out, and struck him. He was going to another accident that involved a female firefighter. She tried to render aid to him and get him to the ambulance, get him to the hospital, but she was unsuccessful in that endeavor. So according to the St. Louis Metro Police Department's probable cause statement, Chavez Rodriguez was driving 71 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour zone. He remained at the scene, taken into custody. His blood alcohol content was 0.1 2 hours after the crash, coming down.
Jeez. So, man, yeah, he probably was around twice the legal limit.
Twice or maybe even triple.
Yeah.
The probable cause statement indicates he does not have legal status in the U.S., driving without a license. Homeland Security was notified that he was arrested, that he was charged, and he was in the country illegally. Their answer is they're not going to issue a detainer. A detainer is something that you would tell the locals to hold them so they can come get him, but they weren't going to do that because he'd already been in the system back in 2020 when this incident occurred. He's been in the system. You don't have to hold him. Just let him go.
Yep. Dude,
Killed a cop. Oh, and as long as you're rocking the Walz and Harris sign, you might be driven by like racial issues more than everybody else. You might see color. Here's the officer. Looks a little tan to me, doesn't he, Garrett?
Yeah. Yeah, and you're not going to hear about this. You will not hear this anywhere unless you go dig. And dude, it's so atrocious, Steve. I know I've been bringing it up a lot lately, but I can't help but think again of Romans 13, the most destroyed piece of scripture in the last 4 years, where cowards use it to say obey the government at every turn, and the government, well, they disregard any piece of scripture, but they have completely flipped it on its head. And because there's a piece in early on in the chapter that says that the government does not bear the sword in vain, because they are to be a terror to evil, a terror to bad, not to good. And this guy, he's already breaking the law. He doesn't have a driver's license. He's not supposed to drive. He's already breaking the law. He's been drinking. Now he's driving. He's already breaking the law because he wasn't supposed to be here in the first place. Because a nation without laws is no nation at all. A nation without borders is no nation at all. And the federal government, we just need bigger, better, more funded federal government, because we're hearing that right now about FEMA. Well, they need more funding. They're out of money. Here's $750 to everybody who's suffering from the hurricane. But we're not going to do our job and put a detainer on this guy and try to deport him after he murdered a freaking cop. But hey, just keep voting. Just keep voting the same way. Just keep, sucking on your thumb. And it's comfortable for me. Like, the Visigoths are in the gate. They're here already, or the Trojan horse is through the gate. Well, whatever metaphor you want to use, it's happening, like right before your eyes.
Well, if you've got the Harris wall sign, you're probably down with the defund the police. I mean, that was both of their directives in 2020, right? So
Mhm.
maybe you don't feel bad. Maybe you think like, hey, it was actually his white supremacy that made him join the police force, which is a derivative of the slave trade, right? Those were the forces that went out to go get escaped slaves. That was probably what drove Officer Lee to join the police department in St. Louis, where he's facing serious crime,
Right.
putting his life on the line for that community. But well, let's worry about the plight of the BIPOC, right? The Black, Indigenous, people of color. And you want to welcome all of everyone into the on Earth into the United States. We should probably be concerned for their welfare. So maybe we can appeal. Maybe we can cross the aisle here, Garrett. Salvadoran migrant. Thank you, Fox News. Salvadoran illegal alien caught and released at the border, arrested for murder of girlfriend in Maryland. 23-year-old Salvadoran illegal alien, I'll correct it, illegal alien, who was caught and released at the southern border in June. So now we're going back 3 months, has been arrested in relation to the murder of his girlfriend. U.S. Border Patrol apprehended Sanchez on June 2nd after he unlawfully entered the U.S. near Santa Teresa, New Mexico. Later that day, enforcement and removal operations placed Sanchez into the Alternatives to Detention program. So that's the ATD is what they call it. Alternatives to Detention means that they're not going to put you in lockup to send you back. They're going to give you a notice to appear in 2032, right? They put a GPS monitor on you, and they terminated him, though, from that program because he absconded. He still had the GPS locator on him, but he just ran away. So he was no longer in the Alternatives to Detention program, but just on the lam in the interior of the country. The local police arrested Sanchez in September, charged him with the murder of his girlfriend. Maryland police confirmed he was wearing an ankle monitor at the time of his arrest. Oh, and she was an illegal too. She was an illegal. So,
Dude, you know,
who are you really concerned about here,
right.
Walls Harris?
Yeah. What, man, I didn't anticipate getting so worked up about this, but how can you not? Like, because as a person, I care about this woman who's dead now, murdered by her boyfriend that that was arrested and released previously. Like, put the piece aside that she's illegal. I don't care as much as now she doesn't have her life because our government again is not doing what they should be doing. Like, yes, I'll concede that neither of them should have been here because they're both here illegally. But I, why? Oh, dude, it's so frustrating. We're letting murderers in, drug dealers, cartel members, gangbangers, actual military aged males from foreign adversaries, not just from Central and South America, but from other places like, oh, I don't know, China. Uh, or, and 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 the government is just complicit and completely complicit with it. And yeah, you're the racist. I'm the racist because what? We actually thought being a nation that has laws and follows laws is appropriate. Like, of course that's appropriate. Why wouldn't that be appropriate? And it seriously is an invasion. It's an invasion at this point, and people, oh, they're being murdered, Steve. They're being freaking murdered.
She was 18. 18. No,
And
now
you
go.
know, another piece of it too is as an American, you know, a lot of people, oh, Americans are racist and they don't want migrants. No, well, actually, me just saying migrant, that's the language problem again.
Yep.
So even Fox News has shifted the
Oh, I mean, dude,
goalpost.
they're Chamber of Commerce. They're all
Yeah.
about that.
And it's like, wait a second. It's illegal aliens. I remember this debate from like the early 2000s when we were kids, you know, like it was, oh, you know, don't call nobody's illegal. Yeah, they are because they're breaking the law that makes it illegal. When you break the law, that's illegal. And so when you come here in violation of our law, because guess what? The laws are still on the books regarding illegal immigration. Don't call him a Salvadorian migrant. So thanks for correcting it as you went through. But that's in the headline. They're not. They're breaking the law. That makes them an illegal alien. It's so frustrating, man, because that's the Marxist agenda. Manipulate the language, shift the goalposts, alter the truth, and just take it and accept it. And now, an 18-year-old young woman with a whole life ahead of her, even if she's here illegally, is murdered.
And it's not just in the inner cities. I mean, Maryland, I mean, that could be Baltimore. Nobody wants to go there, right? That's a hellhole. Every state is a border state now. Every city is a border city. In particular, even in these enclaves, these liberal bastions, right? So you have Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Migrant comes for you as well. Tones
Another
for
one,
thee.
migrant.
In August, ICE arrested a 24-year-old Brazilian illegal at Martha's Vineyard. He illegally entered the U.S. in 2018, facing 5 counts of rape of a Massachusetts minor. These are rapid fire, Garrett. ICE arrested a 28-year-old Salvadoran illegal who was charged with 1 count of rape of a child with a 10-year-old age difference and 2 counts of indecent assault and battery of a child under 14. Officials arrested a Salvadoran national, which I guess that's another way for Fox to say not illegal. He's charged with 11 counts of sex crimes against a child, specifically 3 counts of aggravated rape of a child and 8 counts of indecent assault and battery on a child under 14. ICE charged this guy, Perez Gomez. He's from Guatemala with indecent exposure and battery on a person 14 or older. So he has a proclivity to go for the older gals. And that was against a resident of Nantucket. And ICE announced the arrest of a 30-year-old from El Salvador, illegal, who is a member of MS-13.
Yeah, just keep bringing them in, Steve. I mean, I guess.
Well, we are. So we'll go to this one. Tens of thousands of illegal aliens with sexual assault, homicide convictions roaming the U.S. streets. That's according to ICE. All right, so I'm going to be nerdy. I'm sorry. Not sorry. I got to throw you some numbers here. You ready, Garrett?
I'm ready.
They provided this data. ICE provided this data to Representative Tony Gonzalez, who's a congressman from Texas, about the national data for illegal aliens with criminal charges or convictions. 425,000 convicted criminals, 222,000 with pending charges, 62,000 convicted of assault, 14 convicted of burglary, 56 drugs, 13,000 convicted of homicide, 2,500 kidnapping convictions, 16,000 sexual assault convictions, 1,800 pending homicide, 43,000 assault pending charges, 3,000 burglary pending charges, 4,000 sexual assault charges pending.
Dude, I mean,
and that's what your government reported to you.
Right. So so double it at least. Like when it comes
that's not just sitting in border towns in Texas.
Right. It's everywhere.
We have it in Nantucket, right? We have it in St. Louis. We have it in Maryland. It's everywhere. Nantucket and St. Louis, Missouri, and Maryland are not on the northern or the southern border. They're just being disseminated and dispersed into the interior of the country without any sort of vetting process, because we don't even make them answer questions about why you're seeking asylum.
Mm-hmm.
It's on purpose. It's not. That's what the other thing we talk about language. We call them illegal aliens. Stop saying that Alejandro Mayorkas or Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, whatever your politician of choice is failing at the border. They're not failing. They're succeeding.
Mm-hmm.
Their definition of success is open it up and let as many pieces of human trash come across as possible so they can help speed up the destruction of the country.
Yeah, which is just like, I don't get it. I don't get the Marxist ideology here. Like, why would you want to destroy your own country? And I suppose it's part of a broader globalist agenda where like they want to destroy borders of every nation and just have one world. And well, I guess, I mean, that's true. They want the one world order, and that'll happen eventually. I mean, go read Revelation. It'll happen. So I suppose in a way it's all sovereign, but that doesn't mean we don't stand up against evils like this. And as a nation, like I don't care. Perfect example for us is because of our background in law enforcement. I want to do it correctly. I want to uphold your civil and constitutional rights. And if I have probable cause to make an arrest, that doesn't mean you're guilty. It just means there's enough evidence there. And then, we'll let a jury decide, or you plead or whatever. Well, when it comes to immigration, if you've got pending charges, if you've got known convictions, you can't come here, period. I don't care what your reason is now. I don't care if you're a changed person. You can't come. You're not welcome. And that's just going to be the way it is. And it's like, I would imagine, and I don't know because we didn't work for the Border Patrol, but I would imagine we have laws that are akin to that type of ideology where it's like, no, we need to protect our country. We're not going to let murderers in. 13,000, I think you said, murderers. Like, no, you can't come no matter what. You go back to where you came from. You can't come here.
The convicted of homicide. Let me just make sure I get this. Is 13,000 convicted. Then there are another 2,000 pending. So
Yeah,
nice,
that's
cool
crazy.
15,000. The couple thoughts on this. The message is completely absurd, and they're never called out on it, right? Only the best are coming. Really? Only the best are coming? Then why don't they stay behind and make their countries better, right? And I can't help but thinking, if they were coming here because they're the best and they were becoming lawyers or journalists or politicians, that the people that are saying only the best are coming would want a wall, a big, beautiful wall up, lickety split, because you don't perceive them to be a threat to your life or your livelihood, but they're going to be a threat to your life, as evidenced by the 15,000 convicted murderers that are coming across the border. And they're not just hanging out at Eagle Pass, they're just dispersing around the interior of the country. And then I get to this last part where now I've lost my train of thought because I'm just so angry.
Yeah, it it really is just it's an atrocity. And it's at the hands of our own government. Like it's easy for us to point to government malfeasance and wrongdoing because we literally are on the receiving end of it. And I mean, I'm sure by now some people got to be tired of like, okay, guys, we get it. You're FBI whistleblowers, and your
Yeah.
lives were upended. Okay, blah 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 blah. But look at this. Like, there's just it's the well has no bottom. And
So let's put the well has no bottom. Let's put our investigator hat on. Now I got my train of thought back. Okay. The question to the person that you're running by in their yard and that you see, and they have the Kamala Harris Tim Walz sign. Do you think that we should allow, as a country, every human being on earth into the United States?
exactly right. I mean,
So,
and
so if the answer is no, okay, what's the number, right? And let's just be absurd. Right? Well, we should allow 1 billion people to come to the United States, right? Okay. So on how are you going to prevent 1 billion and one?
mhm.
How would you do that? How do you think that that should happen? And they would have to say, well, I guess you have to build a wall. Oh, so you're in favor of walls. So
Yeah.
the difference is just the number that you're willing to allow in, right? Right. And they have never come to that conclusion because they are not thinking that way. Um, and I really can't attribute anything other than they do not perceive that there's a threat to their way of life, and they are just so desperate to seem woke and liberal and hip, or they just want to fundamentally destroy the country. Either one of those are not a good option.
Yeah, which like that's the piece that I don't get is like you're living here and compared to the history of the world, even compared to the rest of the world now, you're living in relative, you know, like riches. Like if you live in America, we live pretty close to a lake, and like we're not far, or I mean, we're not far at all from like houses that are on the lake, and some of those are ones that have these Harris Waltz signs up, and I really do think like the life you live. I don't know what you do for a living, but you got a lake house. I mean, it's $1 million probably starting to be on this lake, and you want to destroy the nation, or are you just that dumb? But you're engaged enough to have the sign, So I gotta imagine that most of you are engaged enough to know some of the ideology of your chosen candidate, even if she just recently started putting a platform on her website. But you got to have some idea, and you're good with that. Like, at what point are you going to say, I like my comfort, I like my lake house, I like my Tesla or whatever car they have, and a- all of that is intentionally being destroyed. Like, it's coming for you at some point. So at what point does even just mere self-preservation kick in and you realize, like, oh, these policies aren't good for me as someone who lives here?
And even if you're, n- if you, even if you think that a billion people should be let into the United States, illegal aliens that we should just allow, who have not assimilated to our culture, have not bought into our social compact, all that aside, you're just a racist. You don't like these people coming in, right? You're not going to be able to maintain your lifestyle, even if they're the best people.
Mhm.
Okay, even if we're just letting in the people that are philanthropic and doctors into the United States. Doctors from, I don't know, some third world country. Um, let's go to this one about the expense of it, because resources are finite. We can't allow every single person in the country because there's not enough resources. I can't help but think that the Harris Walls people think that the globe's going to end because of resources being used up, right? So maybe we can agree on that. There's a finite number, and you can't just keep printing money, um, despite what your modern monetary theory might tell you. So this comes from the Center for Immigration Studies. Legal immigration is expensive. Solid title. Solid title. I can explain that one maybe to a Tim Walz supporter. Fiscal year 2023, Homeland Security gave out $780 million to localities that are providing critical support to illegal aliens that we've let in. $780 million to give them food, shelter, clothing, medical care, transportation until they get to go to their appearance before the immigration judge in 6 years. That's 1 year of expense, and that's to cover the people that arrived in 2023. Last I checked, we've had more come in 2024, so that money's going up. And that's just one little program. These costs do not include the costs of federal government pays to process inadmissible aliens through the immigration system. Once you arrest them, you got to transport them, you got to detain them, you got to feed them, give them medical care, education programs because they bring their kids, translators, and all the court personnel. They have to pay for all that. That doesn't include, in this roundup, are the costs of taxpayer funding public benefits to migrants who will become eligible as a result of being unlawfully paroled. So we're paroling these people, and then we're going to have to give them welfare, because that's what we do. We bring in just the best, the doctors and the philanthropic people who need welfare. And then these costs do not include $4 billion
Mm.
Biden and Harris administration sent to Central American countries to address the root causes. We'll pay you to not send people. We'll pay you. And then they took the money, and then Daniel Ortega was like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm flying them in.
I'm sending them
The
anyways.
bribe doesn't work. Well, maybe there used to be a long-standing policy: we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Yeah.
That seems like kind of the same thing.
Right. Right, because who were the people inside the Trojan horse, Steve? They were terrorists, because I mean, that's sorry, you don't have to like it. You don't let your emotions get in the way, but humans hate each other. Countries hate each other, and they engage in war, and there are different methods of it, and I think part of this new warfare is just this.
Look,
Just
one
flood the country.
terrorist. I mean, one man's terrorist is another man's gardener or
Yep.
housekeeper,
Yeah.
especially if you live in Nantucket. That's why you really want them there. You want the cheap labor. You want a nanny to watch your kids and make you some nice corn tortillas later. And called me a racist for saying that. And then let's take it back to our element of our ex-girlfriend, Garrett, the Department of Justice. We did work under the Department of Justice. So they are very unhappy with states that are trying to fortify their elections and preventing illegal aliens from voting. The DOJ sues Alabama and their Secretary of State for purging non-citizen voters. Gosh, Fox. Too close to the election. All right. DOJ sued Alabama and their Secretary of State, alleging they had removed voters who had previously been issued non-citizen identification numbers. What is a non-citizen ID number? They're tax processing number issued by the IRS to ensure that people, including undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens, they pay their taxes. So if you can, we know you're here, we give you an assigned number. We know
Yeah.
you're here illegally, give you a number to pay taxes. As long as you pay us, we'll let you stay.
Yep.
Or we'll let you stay anyway. We'll actually give you benefits. Along with paying taxes, non-citizen identification numbers can provide legal migrants with securing a driver's license. But if they don't get it, that's fine. That you can just drive and kill a cop, and providing proof of residency. So the DOJ is arguing that this violates the National Voter Registration Act of 1993, which requires states to complete any changes to the voter registration list no later than 90 days before the election. This came 84 days before the election. So purging illegal aliens off by 6 days too late was a problem. So the DOJ is going to sue, and they're seeking injunctive relief that would, quote, restore the ability of the impacted eligible voters to vote unimpeded on election day. Who is
There-
eligible to
yes,
vote?
exactly. Dude, I mean, again, like, if it's not clear, this ought to be the nail in the coffin. The DOJ
It's Alabama,
yeah,
so yeah, it's not probably going to impact the federal election. It could impact local races because they do have blue areas in Alabama, in the big cities. And what if you and I are like, hey, it's impacting federal races? I mean, maybe not congressman. You could say I don't have standing because it's not your congressman, but that congressperson's going to vote and impact legislation that is going to affect you in Wisconsin and me in Florida. Or what if they actually do impact the president of the United States? I don't have standing though to say that that's a problem.
right. And it's like, if anything, the DOJ here should say, "Oh, yeah, we really shouldn't have illegals voting." Well, the law says 90 days. You know what? We're going to follow the intent of the law, not necessarily the letter of the law here, because you missed the cutoff by 6 days. But hey, as the DOJ, we concur. Illegal aliens should not be allowed to vote, period. But again, it's an intentional destruction. And the current regime, and honestly, like the high ranking officials in pretty much any department in government in DC, they want this. They want it. And I really still I struggle understanding that, because their opulence that they have, that is going to come to an end eventually, down this path.
They want it so badly that they will push political narratives. They will use the powers that they have to push political narratives, which is not new. We've talked about that at length on across all different fronts. But I was waiting for it because there was the whole narrative about the Haitians in Ohio who were eating pets and animals in the park, and we were going to get fact checked on that one. And I kind of ejected because, again, I don't want to hear about your cat, Laken Riley. Say her name.
Yeah.
Say her name,
There you
okay?
go.
We were not supposed to forget that name 6 months ago when they tried to exploit her parents at the State of the Union, Republicans. And you had the little buttons on your lapels and said, "We're never going to forget." And no one's talking about Laken Riley. Meanwhile, her killer might actually get off, if for those who are inclined to pay attention to that story. But that's an aside, the DOJ wanted to give political talking points to Kamala Harris about the Haitians because they said this violent rhetoric. Donald Trump deserves to be assassinated because of this violent rhetoric, by the way, according to the DOJ. And then it's also going to cause the Haitians who are here, who we've paroled illegally into the country, but they're lawfully here. It's going to cause hate crimes against them. They're not citizens, but the DOJ is very uber concerned that they might face hate crimes. And again, we can get off on the hate crimes thing, which is a complete farce to get the federal government involved in local matters. But the DOJ was seeking hate crimes so that they could advertise it. And this was reported by the Daily Wire. And they brought receipts on it. DOJ searched for anti-Haitian incidents to bolster Kamala's claims. Emails show.
I mean, dude, even that right there. How is that not election interference again by the DOJ themselves? Oh, man.
So this is recent, a couple weeks ago, September 13th. The woman's name is Jamaica Sherman. Sounds like a great name. Lead conciliation specialist at the Department of Justice's Community Relations Service. Okay, the DOJ is too big. Lead conciliation specialist at the DOJ Community Relations Service. So you're a professional, useless person until you become useful to create a political narrative for us. She wrote to Rachel Roberts Pickett, an official with Catholic Charities Dallas that, quote, my colleagues and I were tasked, who tasked you, with researching information regarding the Haitian community. Are you aware of any reports of hate crimes, hate incidents? What's a
What,
hate incident?
dude?
Or community conflicts surrounding the Haitian community, unquote, Sherman asked. Catholic Charities is paid by the federal government to resettle the migrants. So now we have lots of factors in here, right?
Oh yeah.
Catholic Charities uh, are one of the biggest importers of illegal aliens. They know where their bread is buttered. You know, if they could find anything, they desperately would to give the DOJ that talking point. And then the DOJ separately is purposely being tasked. They're tasking their lead conciliation specialist with finding potential hate crimes and incidents that they can then create a narrative, very much like a 51 intelligence officials, saying this has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation to hand to the vice president who's running for president.
Right. I mean, like, honestly, like, how do you not look at the current iteration of the DOJ and say, oh, yeah, this is the road of the Stasi? Like, this is exactly what secret police do. They are in the bag entirely for whichever side, whichever regime. And I mean, they don't even hide it anymore. Like, it's been what, 3 election cycles now where they are intimately getting involved to try to shift the narrative towards a particular candidate. That's election interference right there. And like, here they're trying to cherry pick incidents. And guess what? When you flood a small community with an overwhelming amount of people from a different culture, there is going to be conflict. Eh, Of course, there's going to be conflict.
What happens when you flood a community with a bunch of people from a different culture who don't assimilate, and then you reward them with lots of benefits and tell them that anyone who criticizes you for not assimilating is racist, and then you can't police them? Oh, I know what you do. You bring them on as your police, right?
There you
That's what
go.
you should do in Tim Walls's Minnesota, the land of 1,000 genders. Minneapolis swears in its first non-U.S. citizen as a police officer.
Dude.
Police Department Minnesota reported that Leslie Vera, native of Somalia, sworn in Thursday, and she moved to Minneapolis with her parents from their arrival point in Mexico, because it goes Somalia to Mexico, right?
Yeah, because that makes sense.
When she was 4, she's a legal resident alien authorized to work, but is not a U.S. citizen. So she's not a citizen. She can't be deported, but she's not a citizen. She's never taken an oath of allegiance to our country.
Hmm.
She's going to be on the streets enforcing the law. I think if I scroll down here, I'll find a picture of her. Garrett, I don't think that I would be really worried about her
No.
taking me to the ground.
Nope, not gonna happen. Dude, we are. I just, I know I mentioned it recently, the fall of Minneapolis. Like, this is part of that. This is part of the fallout of Minneapolis. Like, I know they're hard up for cops, but you're not. That's it's your own doing, and now you're gonna hire non-citizens. Where does it stop?
Well, we don't have enough people after seeing 2020, you don't have enough people that want to be cops anymore. You don't have enough good people. So, hey, let's just let them blood in here and let them become cops, because
Mhm.
they have no track record of coming from countries that are with corrupt governments and corrupt police forces. Not to say that
Exactly.
ours isn't, but let's just import
Mhm.
that sort of heritage to infiltrate our police departments when they have no allegiance to our system of government, our constitution, and frankly, no love lost for our people who they just go to as their sugar daddy. Give me more benefits or else I'll riot.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of that, did you hear recently in Argentina? There was like some protests being planned, and what's his name, Malaya, or what, however you say it, the president there was like, if you block the streets, you're not getting your government welfare, payments. And guess what? No streets were blocked. But that's how it goes, right? Is people, well, because people are well, when I was in South Dakota, I was on the phone with a buddy of mine from the police department I used to work at, and we were talking about this a little bit, how humans often, they don't do the hard thing. They want the path of least resistance. And well, sucking on the teat of government, even in America in 2024, that's it. And it's your modern day slavery. And people want it. They want it. Illegal immigrants come here for it and want it. And the government apparently wants to give it to them, and that's how they keep you down. Is they keep you at a certain threshold of what they're willing to give you. They're going to throw you little stale breadcrumbs, peasant, and take it. And dude, it's just this stuff is. I'm pretty worked up today, Steve. Not gonna lie.
And we got through it all. I mean, it was a voluminous quantity of stories. I think if I wrote down, I had 14 different things to bring up in our little program here, and we got through them all in relatively close to the 1 hour mark. So,
Yeah.
as is our tradition here, we want to throw it to Garrett for his thoughts, and then we're gonna have a nice little palate cleanser to calm down on your weekend.
Yeah. We're going to go to Psalm 147. And because we talked about this before, we played it. We played the commercial or whatever. Jesus was a refugee. I mean, one, he wasn't, because guess what? Egypt was part of the Roman Empire too back then. So they just moved from one part of the empire to the other to avoid being killed with all the other young children that Herod was murdering at the time, which I guess ties into post-birth abortion that is a thing, more and more in America. But anyways, Psalm 147 in verse 13, it says, "For he strengthens the bars of your gates, he blesses your children within you, he makes peace in your borders. He fills you with the finest of the wheat." And then I bring that up because it's clear all over the place that lands and nations have borders and gates and walls and fortifications in different heritages and different nationalities. And this lie of the left, of Satan, of Marxists, that, oh, we're all just gonna be one. And oh, what is it that Karl Marx said that Kamala has clung to? We're going to be unburdened by what has been, such as borders, such as nations. And that's what they want. They want it. It's a satanic lie and a deception. I mentioned it earlier. You don't have to take my word for it. Go read the book of Revelation. It's clear that there will be that one world order at some point. That doesn't mean you don't fight against it, you don't resist it, you don't point to the truth of why a nation's sovereignty is important, not only for you, but for your kids, for your loved ones, for your neighbors, for your friends. And yeah, I don't know where we go from here, but if it's going to get better in America, I think it's going to get worse first, and this is a huge piece of that.
My fear is that it will take a significant passage of time for it to get better. If you know, you know, guys. All right, here's a palate cleanse because I thought of the Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard angle to it. It comes from Nate Bargatze, who we've played before. I just think he's a great comedian, very family friendly. Don't have to do any worried about it. And he's talking about dog bakeries. So we'll play this and then we'll get you off on your weekend.
Look, in all seriousness, I don't know. No, look, the it's getting very advanced. All right, I've been to a dog bakery. I've been to a dog bakery in my life, and this wasn't in Beverly Hills or like Miami or something. You feel like they would have something like that, and this was in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. And if you don't know where Mount Juliet is, it's fine, but I bet you can tell that doesn't sound like a town you would drive through going, I bet they have a pretty good dog bakery here. I went in there and no one was in there. The lady was looking at me like, are you here to buy this store for me? That was her only hope. I talked to her. She had some time on her hand, excited to talk. And she said her and her husband bought the store for their 27-year-old daughter who graduated from college with a degree and came out of college and said, I want to own a dog bakery. I want to make cakes for dogs. Which if I asked my 6-year-old what she wants to do when she grows up, I think she'll tell me she wants to make cakes for dogs. And I'm gonna tell her that she can do whatever she wants to do, hoping she doesn't turn 27 and go, let's talk about those cakes for those dogs. And maybe they're usually busy. Maybe I was on there on a slow dog birthday day. I don't know. All right. She told me everything was organic, and I was like, that's good. That's what I like to hear. All right. This is for that dog that's outside licking gum off the sidewalk right now. And if anybody deserves organic food in our house, it's not this little girl. I'm not going to waste it on her. It's for that dog that's wandered out in the highway because it doesn't know what cars are.
All right, guys.
Oh, that's good stuff.
He is great. He's very enjoyable. Nate Bargatze, always worth a laugh. Hopefully that brought you up after the black pill type of episode that we had today, but it was necessary to do, as is the American Radicals podcast tradition. So that's going to do it for us today on a Saturday. Back with you Tuesday, 0830 on the Eastern Seaboard here on Rumble, rumble.com/amradpod. If you haven't already, guys, make sure that you do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel. And until next time, have a great and safe weekend.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.
Everybody out in the world,